This is Dateline News and Conversation. My guest tonight is a 1984 graduate of the United States Air Force Academy. He spent 20 years as an officer in the United States Air Force, was honorably discharged in 2004 as a major.
Honorably retired.
Retired, pardon me. My guest, Ted McIntire. Ted, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Regis. Thanks for having me on.
Um, you become an activist, one of many who have served in the United States military. I want to ask you about, I think, something that you've explained to me is of most importance and a major concern. What's happening in Gaza and Palestine and the silence from around the world. Tell me a little bit about this initiative and this area of focus.
Well, thank you, Regis, for recognizing my activist stance. I understand myself to be a humanitarian, and I'm understanding that in this last decade of my life. I grew up in a military family, and my father was in the Second World War. He was in the Army Air Corps. I have five older brothers and one younger brother, a family of seven. And of the seven brothers, six of us attended US service academies. Four of us went to the United States Air Force Academy. Three of us graduated. Two brothers, went to the United States Merchant Marine Academy. So we took the oath of office as officers upon entering those service academies and upon graduating. And like a lot of young people, I joined when I was 18 years old, right out of high school. I was attracted by following in the footsteps of my elder brothers. I was attracted to the ability to maybe fly, maybe be a fighter pilot, or otherwise defend my country, defend the Constitution. But I realized later in life that throughout my life, I've had a humanitarian outlook. Even my degree from the United States Air Force Academy was in humanities, a master's of science in humanities. It's because at the service academies, definitely at the Air Force academies, they load you up with so many science classes as part of your core curriculum that every graduate, at least when I attended in the 1980s, graduates with a Bachelor of Science. And then whatever your chosen major is, that also appears on your graduation plaque. Although I attended the Air Force Academy and with the intention of flying, and had elder brothers who were fighter pilots, carrier pilots, instructor pilots, transport pilots, I understood from a young age that there was something off with the system. And I didn't want to compromise myself by agreeing to go to pilot training and then to be the operator of an aircraft if I didn't have sufficient confidence in my leadership or the US government. Because I knew that there would be, let's say, a worst case scenario or a most demanding scenario where I might be on a runway on alert in a US military aircraft loaded with the most lethal weapons and be told, you need to take off, you're going to fly to a waypoint and then release your weapon. Because I knew enough that I would not be given the chance to say, why is that? What's really going on? What's happened? It's just take an order and execute the order. And at that young age, I already saw enough of the irresponsible behavior of dishonesty and lack of integrity, I guess, and lack of honor among those at the United States Air Force Academy. Now, it wasn't so bad that I lost all confidence in the military or the Air Force or even the Air Force Academy, but it gave me pause. And I never gained enough confidence to, let's say, to go down that path. And I chose a different path, which was project management or acquisition management, which is very similar to contracting, but on a very grand scale. And it wasn't until I was well into that career that I realized I had chosen an even more lethal career than the pilots. I was among those who was an integral part of the military-industrial complex, this unstoppable monster that we've been warned about since the days of Eisenhower and has never been dealt with, and is continuing to become more dangerous, more deadly, more problematic as each year passes. And I think that many of us are waking up to that fact. And I woke up to it little by little by little, but definitely by the time 9/11 rolled around, and then immediately was followed by the Patriot Act, which came out of nowhere, I just had enough, and I retired as soon as I could and wanted to put, an end to my participation. So I retired after 20 years and one day in 2004. That was 20 years after I graduated from the Air Force Academy in 1984.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Ted. I think a lot of people will respect that. An awful lot of people will understand that. I spent a lot of time a number of years ago with veterans from the Vietnam War, with the organization Veterans for Peace in the United States. And I know how so many people have come to the understanding of what they were once committed to do, uphold the Constitution of the United States, were deployed to do just the opposite, and to do things that were, I will say, against their conscience, and violently, vehemently against their conscience. So I appreciate what you've been through. I appreciate that very much.
Let me just say something briefly about that. We grew up in the United States of America, understanding that there was a lot to be grateful for and proud of being a United States citizen. Unfortunately, what's happened since the Second World War is this shadow entity, which I call the United States Imperium or Empire, has sprung up. And the same entities in Washington who, through our Constitution, are empowered, and elected and placed in power to run the country, they've become this infrastructure of the American Imperium. And, there's so much concern about we need national security. Every country says we need national security. But what about human security? Looking after the people. Now, organizations like Veterans for Peace, they say there should be we want to do away with war, we want to do away with conflict. I think that's very difficult. My argument is we need less national security and more human security. And you can get this human security by just transferring over from the national security. And the biggest causes that I am in support of as a humanitarian and an active humanitarian, an activist, which is just a small percentage of the population, are all seem to be based on human need or putting the person first. Yeah, I'll pause there and continue on.
Well, I want to continue on that vein. Um, I think I've been involved with a few people who are concerned about the same thing. They might not use the term human security, but in terms of looking at what's wrong with the current systems of government, they are not putting the concerns of their people first. And from what I'm understanding, where you're coming from, you're saying the same thing: human security, the security of individuals in society. And that has got to be the role and the purpose of government. Would you agree with that?
Yes, very well said. I'll add that human security is a relatively new concept. I think it was 1994 in the United Nations Development Report. It was introduced on an international scale. And the Wikipedia page, I don't always use Wikipedia and I don't always recommend it, but the Wikipedia page for human security is highly recommendable. And I refer to it often. We can put bombs and bullets anywhere on the planet. Let's put food and water anywhere on the planet. Let's make sure that everyone on the planet has shelter, a house, an apartment. Let's make sure everyone has education. Let's make sure everyone has access to medical care and a clinic or a hospital. We've got enough missiles. We've got enough fighter aircraft. We've got enough bombers. We've got enough nuclear weapons to destroy the world 5, 10 times over. But somehow our elected leaders, can't put it together to make sure that the people who elected them are taken care of.
I'm glad you expanded on what human security meant. Food, water, shelter, education, medical care, all provided by the government. That's not the case in the United States. It's not the case in a lot of countries. But I want to ask your opinion now. You talked about these people that are elected to serve our needs. They don't. There are a scarcity of people in the United States Congress that really, I think, care about that. When they use the term national security, can you decode that for me? What do they really mean when they say national security?
Well, these days, every country, every government in the world can use that term to justify anything and everything that they want to do that satisfies, let's say, the rich and the wealthy, the complex that's got its hands around the throat of almost every government on the planet. And the analogy has been made, it used to be like the different nations were different ships on the ocean or on a lake that were, pursuing their national interests, but they had to look out that they weren't smashing into each other. But now with this globalized society, this interconnected world, that analogy, that metaphor doesn't work. We're all in the same huge ship. And we got some sane leaders, and we got a bunch of lunatics who are all fighting over the controls of this giant ship. and they're threatening to capsize it, all in the name of national security. And you do need, and I think it's fair and acceptable that a certain small percentage of each person's, each community's, each nation's in the world's income, national product, gross national product, is dedicated to keeping yourself safe. That's understandable. Most of us know that when you leave your house, it's probably a good idea to lock it. Or if you're parking downtown in a big city, to lock your vehicle. Or if you're walking around, keep your valuables close and maybe hidden. And you spend a little bit of your effort, a little bit of your income doing that. But it doesn't mean that if you park your car, that you pour gasoline on the 4 cars around you and light them on fire to make sure that nothing affects your car. That's an exaggeration, but maybe in certain situations it's not an exaggeration. Like when people are going to extremes and they're peddling gas cans and gasoline and lighters because they're making a little bit of profit off it. I mentioned that I was, yeah, the hold of it's gotten so bad from the time of Eisenhower and his warning of the military industrial complex that the corporate and government institutions, they've turned into thieves, rapists, mass murderers, or weaponizing the entire establishment and its infrastructure against the people. Because through these methods, they're becoming, those who are in positions of power are becoming more powerful and more wealthy in driving their ideas, whether they're sane or crazy. They have the ability to put their ideas into effect, but they're not considering their fellow man, and not even their fellow of their own nation. They're victimizing their own constituents. And I've gotten to the point of working this, and I've been pretty active for the last 15 years. So I've been at it for a while, and I've been watching, and I've been doing all sorts of initiatives. And I've gotten to the point where I'm not pointing at the politicians and saying, you're wrong, you're bad, don't do that. I'm alerting my neighbors and as many people as possible to who they have been electing and choosing and voting for, and saying, hey, and I'll tell you the scenario. I did this in a little village of 1,500 people in the deep northeast of the United States. So this is Maine, northern New Hampshire, northern Vermont, northern New York. There's a little village there where I have a little house. And I told the neighbors back last decade, hey, Trump is committing war crimes and his administration is complicit in the war crimes of Yemen. And I made a real spectacle of myself. I did everything but light myself on fire just to ensure that the people realized what was going on. And as you probably know, in New Hampshire, they have the pride of having the first presidential primary of the year. So take yourself back to January of 2024, when the presidential elections were coming up. New Hampshire had the first primary. I believe it was the 23rd or 24th of January, 2024. And despite my warnings in my little village of 1,500 people, 900 voters, give or take, 90% of them voted for known war criminals. 90% of them voted for either Donald Trump, who was a known war criminal in that village, Holocaust Haley, who served as the United Nations, known war criminal, or genocide Joe Biden. So 90% of my neighbors were voting for known war criminals in January 2024. And I had put out the warnings before the October 7th kickoff of the Gaza craziness. And I was just really disappointed because I waited and I looked, and throughout all of New Hampshire, all the citizens voted, 90%. And I said, this is a problem. This is part of the problem. We could spend an hour, you and I, talking about the insanity of some of the elected leaders in the West. But I can tell you, they only get there because the people choose them.
Well, I agree with you totally. I have been saying for years that the people of the United States who choose these people, for whatever reason, the lesser of two evils, they're still evil. But I have said for many years now, those people in the United States who have invested in these companies, the military industrial complex on Wall Street, have blood on their hands. And
it's the entire establishment, all corporations. You know, anything that has to do with the establishment, they've got blood on their hands. They're complicit. How can I say that? Because they know what's happening. They can't avoid it. We're seeing Auschwitz on TikTok. Everyone is. And if you're not, it's because you're intentionally denying it. Your tax dollars are being used for those 2,000-pound bombs. I'm talking about people in the United States. Your tax dollars are being used to purchase and deliver those 2,000-pound bombs to Israel, which are then dropped on women and children in tents. And your elected representatives are approving it. I have 2 decades experience in foreign military sales. During my time, we always asked ourselves and each other, is it legal? And I was never, ever involved, and I never could consider or comprehend the possibility that the United States military would be involved in transferring weapons to a country who was actively involved in war crimes and genocide. But again, this is from my sensibilities coming through the system in the 1980s, and then seeing what happened at the turn of the century, 2000, and getting out of the military as fast as I possibly could. You are correct. Everyone in the United States has blood on their hands. Everyone.
all right, you mentioned we've talked war criminals, and who are they? And we've talked about the support that the United States government has been and is giving to Israel.
And the citizens of the United States. And the citizens. They're fully behind this. They're fully behind this. Believe it or not, the citizens are in the majority, still fully behind their elected poison.
Yeah, I don't want to believe that, but I have to agree with you. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing as comfortably as they're doing. Now, I want to focus on Gaza and Palestine. Now, I've been living in the Russian Federation in Crimea for the last 5.5 years. I've been coming here since 2016, and we have been experiencing a devastating war crime right next door in Ukraine. It is a form of genocide, with the United States using NATO and the EU to conduct a 14-year war on the people of the Donbass, who refused to be part of the coup and the ultra-right Nazi regime that took over in Kiev. So people here understand what is happening, and people here would not shy away from using the term war criminals on the people in NATO who openly are promoting war this very day on Russia, on the United States official foreign policy declaration to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia. Only a war crime, only a war criminal can describe what's happening here. Now, October 7th.
Well, let me pause you there. I've heard from just one source, but it all rings true, that when Biden was elected and installed, one of his ambassadors in Kiev, the ambassador, so this was, about 4 years ago, the ambassador put out the word that the number one priority at the embassy was collecting information on Russian war crimes committed against Ukraine. That's their attitude. Now, it's understandable to me, because I see this conflict being mostly about a war of information. The First World War was really about material, land, manufacturing, everything material. Okay, this is a theory of mine. The Second World War was about energy. Who has the most energy and who can cut off the other guy's energy. And then Russia won the war, but the United States won the peace. And the way the United States topped it off was with this super energetic weapon called a nuclear weapon. Now, this one, what's coming up, what we're facing, I don't think it's going to be like the First World War or the Second World War. This one, I believe, is about information. Alex Jones has a lot on the ball, even though he's a little bit out there. Information wars, okay? And so telling the global majority, hey, these guys are the worst people on the planet, they commit war crimes. That was the plan of Washington and London and NATO. That was part of the plan all along. And, one of the guests that you've had on your program, Ray McGovern, did an excellent job of summarizing what was happening in February of 2022, was it? When the special military operation, how many artillery, how much artillery was being fired at civilian population centers by Ukraine against the people of Donbass, and how it was increasing day after day after day, immediately leading up to the initiation of the special military operation. And we know, we generally all agree, there were about 5,000 casualties on the Ukrainian side, the Ukrainian military, and about 5,000 fatalities among the militia or the defenders of the Donbass, and about 4,000 civilians killed. This is in leading up to the big showdown. Now you get to the big showdown, and those numbers will be increased by at least 10, usually 100 or more. So you go from 5,000 Ukrainians to what, 500,000 or 1 million casualties, if not 1.5 million? Russia was, Russia's not dumb. I don't have, I've gained a lot of knowledge and a lot of appreciation, a lot of respect for how they've conducted this conflict. And their casualties are a lot less. And it's been made clear that the reason for all this is they're protecting the people. The West had the answer. It was given to them on a silver platter. The Minsk Agreement. Just do the Minsk Agreement. Imagine how much life you will save. Imagine how much chaos you will avoid. But that wasn't profitable for those in Washington. That wasn't profitable for the defense contractor. That's not profitable for the establishment. And the people of the United States, they were willing to go along with it because they're brainwashed. They actually believe, and when I have conversations with them, they feed back to me their counter arguments, which are hollow lies that they've heard either on the left, CNN or channels like that, or on the right, Fox or channels like that. They're not even thinking for themselves. And they're still not waking up to the reality of the situation.
Yeah. And this underscores what you said about the information wars. You and I are involved in the information war.
Everyone is. Everyone on the planet is.
Well, those of us who have platforms and are speaking out are involved in that. I have said for several years, living here in Russia, that Russia has lost the information war. Russia has not been winning against the massive 24/7, decades-old United States propaganda, lies that have been not only been perpetrated on the American people, but people all over the world. And Russia has not been successful in competing in these wars. But I'm glad that you mentioned that, because what you and I are trying to do is educate, inform, and wake up people before it's too late. Now, I didn't want to focus so much on Ukraine and the special military operation, because what's overshadowed that has been the worst, in my opinion, war crime in the history of the planet, far worse than what the Nazis did during World War II. What is happening in Gaza and Palestine, without question, is a genocide. We've all seen it unfold every day. Now, you have been focusing on this issue a great deal. I'd like you now to tell me and share with our audience what your position has been, what you've been trying to do to end the genocide, to wake people up.
Well, because of my background and because of my orientation, I paid a lot of attention to what was going on in Yemen last decade. And also, I decided, after living all over the United States and in 6 different countries, that really what I needed to do was settle down on the East Coast of the United States. And when I made that decision, I could also decide to dig my feet in a little, my roots in a little bit, and maybe look at a second career late in life. So this was a full decade after I had finished with the military and done two very short, very special jobs in as a defense contractor. I did 1 year in Afghanistan and I did 2 years in Abu Dhabi. And if anyone wants to know those details, it's on my LinkedIn profile. It's public record. Everything with me is transparent. But I decided to go back to school, and I decided to study film and videography, in part because of people like yourself, because, I was inspired by yourself, Mel Van Dusen, others that I met in the citizen diplomacy arena, who were working to improve relations between the peoples of the planet, between the people of the United States and the West and the people of Russia and the former Soviet Union. And I saw how powerful it was, and I just wanted to learn more. And so while I was a student, I was also paying attention to what was going on in Yemen. And for my finals in December of 2018, I created a 2-minute video entitled, "Who is War Criminal Donald?" And I summed up all the violations of international humanitarian law that were ongoing in Yemen under and being perpetrated by Saudi Arabia, and to a lesser extent aided by United Arab Emirates, but with the weapons from the United States. And specifically, what I focused on was precision-guided weapons. So these are weapons, if I want to hit one house on a street, I can hit that house from 10,000, 20,000 feet. Not the house next to it, not the house in front of it, not the house behind it. So what was being hit in Yemen is what was being targeted. And what was being targeted were markets, schools, hospitals, civilian centers, weddings, funerals, you name it. And I said, that's a war crime. And our president at the time, Trump, is complicit in those war crimes. And there's plenty of documentation and plenty of references, including to the United Nations reports that warned of war crimes and specifically called out Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, United States, Germany, I believe France, England, and maybe Germany. I'm not sure, which of the European countries were called out. And I stand against war crimes and genocide. I am fully in support of the international humanitarian law. And that doesn't create any conflict, because military personnel are instructed, especially at the academies, you're only following lawful orders. We're educated about the Nuremberg war crimes. The war criminals got up and said, I was only following orders. No, that's not a defense. It wasn't a defense then, and it's not a defense now. And so, to my dismay, I didn't get hardly any attention or any attraction or any change with my activity regarding Yemen. But it is all documented. And it has nothing to do with historic Palestine. It has nothing to do with the Holy Land. It had nothing to do with Israel. So no one can blame me for being an anti-Semite for what I said about Yemen. And what I had to say about Yemen rings true time and time and time again for what's going on in historic Palestine, for what's going on in Gaza, and to a lesser extent, the West Bank, and what's gone on since the Nakba in the 1940, I think it was 1947. I'm not an expert, and I sometimes might get a date wrong or a name wrong. But everything that I'm saying has been documented. And it's just unfathomable. Actually, for about the first, definitely 6 months, I just sat and watched what was happening. Because any commentary that I had, any contribution I had already said it a decade ago about Yemen. But only when new developments occurred did I chime in. And it got to a point where I got so very frustrated and was so upset and wounded to the heart, to the soul, that I was on social media and just posting that video from last decade, who was war criminal Donald, and then a screenshot of that in various social media platforms. And what happened was I saw that people on LinkedIn were responding positively. So LinkedIn would give me this feed of BS, people in my network who weren't very smart or maybe were, or a lot of ads. And I would just add into the comment that video and a clip from the video. And all of a sudden, hundreds of people started watching the video. And I said, wait a second. What would happen if I started a group on LinkedIn for people who were resonating with this video? So initially, the group was called Worldwide Palestine Solidarity. It began the last week of February 2025. So in the months of March, April, May, June, July, now we're into August, 5+ months, it's grown by about 1,000 people a month. And these are generally Palestinian diaspora, humanitarians, people who want to speak up. And although we're shadow banned and ghosted by LinkedIn, we are able to post and to grow our group as long as we adhere to the principles of nonviolence and we avoid hate speech. Now, how did I do that? And when I started the group and I invited people to join, a lot of people with lots of followers says, I'm not wasting my time on a LinkedIn group. It's just going to get shut down. Because everyone wanted to react with hate. I don't have any other word for it, against this country in the Middle East. I said, wait a second. First and foremost, I'm an American. I want to fix my country, and I don't want my country complicit in these war crimes and genocide. So I set up my group, and the information about the group is there. It's still there. And it's to hold the United States accountable for its conduct. So when I would post about the United States' role in what's transpiring in Gaza. And when people wanted to post in the group and they had a lot of hate for country X or person Y, I said, wait a second, you might post that individually, you might post that in another group, but in this group that you've joined, it's clearly stated in the focus of the group is for the US to hold itself accountable for war crimes and genocide. That's Title 18, U.S. Code, Section 2441, war crimes. It's a U.S. law. It's been on the book for decades. And what it says is those who commit war crimes that result in death may be punished by death. And that's a revelation for a lot of people, because the US government is not explaining that to the people. The media is not explaining that to the public. Nobody's explaining that to the public. Even the local law enforcement is ignorant of it and wants to be ignorant of it, because nobody wants to deal with this issue because it pervades the entire society. So rather than, take the screen, I further developed this concept and said, not only are our politicians responsible, but our neighbors, our fellow citizens are responsible because they voted them into place. So I'll do a trick that some others do, and I don't know if this comes out, straight or in reverse, but I announced a run for Congress here in Cape Love, North Carolina. And I'm not sure if it's coming through properly, but I'll read it for you. Major McIntire retired for Congress, Cape Love, North Carolina, 2026. And you can see this if you go to the LinkedIn site. This is one of the many. This is what I have as my profile picture on LinkedIn. My campaign pledge is to seek the death sentence for Congressman Rouser in accordance with his role in the war crimes of Yemen last decade, in the war crimes of Gaza this decade. In the final bottom line of that announcement is Title 18 U.S. Code Section 2441 War Crimes. Do I anticipate I'll be elected to Congress? I got a snowball's chance in hell of being elected to Congress. But nothing says that I can't run for Congress and I can't educate the public as to what's going on. And that's what I'm doing. And because I'm running for Congress, and that's something that falls under democracy, and I'm using freedom of speech, and I'm not advocating for murdering his family, the women in his family, or the children in his family. I'm just advocating for law and order. That's what the Republicans love, law and order. And that's what I'm calling for. And nobody has come to my door. Major McIntire, we want to talk to you about your social media posts. They can't stop me. 1, because they're ignorant. 2, because they're guilty. 3, because they know I'll take their name, their data, and if I can, I'll record them. And they're probably complicit in the war crimes. So it's a totally new way of approaching this issue. Unfortunately, the bulk of the people, the 5,000 plus members, are a little bit stuck on this overwhelming grief, fear, anger, hate. And they do what I call is war pornography. They're putting out pictures, sharing pictures of the most despicable, horrible war crimes that have been committed against the people of Gaza. And they do get a lot of attention. And it is a necessary step to educate the public as to what's going on. And over the last 5 months, it has worked to open up media around the world to at least admit some part of what's going on in Gaza. Now you'll see, you wouldn't see this in years past or in months past, but starting this month, this last month, you've seen national news media talking about hunger in Gaza. They don't even say they're being starved by the oppressors. And your country is part of the blockade. They haven't gotten there yet. But it's a slippery slope. And now that they've gone to the hunger thing, there's no stopping it. It's so bad, Regis. It's so bad. And I don't know how much more time you want to dedicate to this, and I'm happy to spend as much time as necessary. But I'm going to tell you this. This Epstein thing is a real thing. It was promised to the people by those who were elected, and now they're reneging on their promise. They don't want to have any accountability. Epstein is all about the mass rape of women and children. The mass rape by the wealthy and powerful. What's Gaza? The mass murder of women and children by the wealthy and powerful. It's all for the same deal. The same people. The United States public, although they're still echoing the brainwashing from the left and the right, and they're not nipping this problem in the bud. They do know, enough of them know, we want accountability. We can have it. We've been promised it. We gave you our support, and we want it. And there are quite a few posts that I've put recently linking the mass rape of women and children to the mass murder of women and children. It's been done by the powerful and wealthy in this country, for sure. Democrats, Republicans, those who don't identify as either, those who are controlling the strings of, these idiots who allow themselves to be elected into Congress and into the Senate, the House of Representatives and the Senate. They're all guilty. And everyone that cares to know it knows it. And my campaign is to say, by the way, there's a law for that. And the law says you can be put to death for it.
Ted, I value very much your passion, your focus, everything you've said. I could not have said it any better, and certainly without as much passion and conviction. I'll do what I can to spread your message, but you wrote something to me about your forecast for Donald Trump. As we conclude, what is your forecast for Donald Trump?
Well, I'm very concerned. I consider myself a Christian. So even though I disagree, I still pray for them. I pray that they make the right decision. I pray that the Creator, in my own life, I've made mistakes, but if they're meant to turn out for the well-being of all, it can happen. So even though so many mistakes have been made, I still pray for them. I still pray for the best. But I think it's gotten to the point where what's going on is so intolerable. And everyone in Washington realizes that they are so compromised, they need to do something. And that what they need is a scapegoat. And rather than admit that they're all guilty of war crimes and genocide and they should all be, suffer the consequences, be accountable, I see more and more and more the word insanity, mad, crazy being used whenever Trump's name is used in a headline. And definitely everyone agrees what's being done is reckless. It might work if you're trying to build a skyscraper in downtown Manhattan and you're having to deal with different mobs and syndicates and crazy situations. But transferring that to the international stage and then sprinkling on nuclear weapons, it doesn't work. One of the possibilities is that everyone's going to say, take him out, not through assassination, but that he's got mental health problems. So you can check it yourself. You can Google. Smart people can analyze it over time. How much do these insanities, crazy, mad, adjectives show up in headlines along with Trump? And I've seen it going up and up and up and up. That's one scenario. The other scenario is not so pretty, is that the US and the West doesn't change its ways. And we keep pursuing these selfish, irresponsible actions till it leads to war. And then instead of the United States and the entire establishment, infrastructure, corporate, saying, hey, let's turn the Ukrainian youth into cannon fodder. Hey, let's turn the people of Gaza into the cannon fodder. So let's turn the people of Cambodia and Thailand or Pakistan and India into cannon fodder so that there's blood on the streets and we can buy property at the lowest price and then develop it and live off the rent, live off the investment. Because that's what they're doing. That's what they've been doing. That's how the military industrial complex has expanded to encompass the entire establishment. And the people of the United States subconsciously will get themselves into a position where they're in a world war and they're going to take people who in 2025, so it'll take about 5 or 10 years to fully play out. But the people who are right now are teenagers and 20 years old in the United States, they're going to be turned into cannon fodder by their own elders, by their own parents and uncles and grandparents, because they painted themselves into such a corner that there's no other way out, that they either have to look into a mirror and say, we are horrible people and we deserve all the economic disaster that will befall us, or they say, let's roll the dice and let's go for another world war. There's this delusion within the United States that the United States won or significantly contributed to the First World War. Hardly at all. Or that the United States won the Second World War. A total lie. Russia won the Second World War. Russia destroyed Germany at great cost. The United States won the peace, right? The United States won the peace. And that's why so few countries are joining into the defense of the Palestinians, because they know from history, whoever goes in first is going to get whacked the hardest. It's better to hold back and wait until the end when everybody's bloody and messy and weak, and then entering in, you'll get a better lion's share for yourself, if that's your orientation, or your government, if that's your orientation, your people or your country, if that's your orientation, right? So that's why everybody's holding back, because nobody wants to be the first ones in and get slaughtered. They want to be the last ones in. And the United States is doing something very devious. What Trump is doing and his whole administration, they're destroying the world economy. Currency by currency, region by region, knowing that the United States will be the last to fall. And they're continuing to sell debt. And I guarantee you, they're selling worthless paper, worthless electronic commodities, and they're buying hard assets. They're buying land. They're buying gold and silver. They're buying commodities, something you can touch, something you can hold, something that can't be just gone with a click of a mouse in Washington or London or somewhere else. So those are two scenarios that I'm watching. It's based on all my cumulative lifetime experience and dedicating the last 15 years to trying to improve the trajectory of my own country, improving it for the benefit of the people in my country and the people all over the world.